I would get attention and appreciation through being the listener. So that became almost second nature in me. Listening to people in my groups of friends, not only my family of birth, but in groups of friends, with my partners. The comment that I would get, the feedback I would get is, you're such a good listener. You just listen so well. I feel so cared and so held by you and so contained.
Why do you do what you do? I know you have a personal story, but is there something more? Because a lot of people probably have a personal story, but don't get into this space.
So in a way, what's that personal story that got me there?
Yes.
Okay. I suppose, and that's something that actually I had to unpick during my training. For me, being my role in my family of birth, I'm the fourth of four siblings. I'm number 4. I'm the baby. And I suppose when I got into the picture, all the roles had been handed out, and I assumed that the way for me to get the way in which I became the listener, basically. So I would get attention and appreciation through being the listener. So that became almost second nature in me. Listening to people in my groups of friends, not only my family of birth, but in groups of friends, with my partners. The comment that I would get, the feedback I would get is, you're such a good listener. You just listen so well. I feel so cared and so held by you and so contained. And what I had to grapple with was how much of that was truly me. How much of that was something that came from my core, it came from myself, and how much of that I felt I had to do to be appreciated, to be loved, to be regarded. I came to the conclusion that obviously that's what brought me partly into this field, but this idea of helping, I realized through the experience I shared with you earlier, that being in a therapeutic relationship, bonding with someone that offered me that unconditionality, that empathy, that warmth, that helped me join the dots myself whilst I felt connected to them. So that connection, that relationship in itself was therapeutic for me. I worked through a lot of my own demons through being in that close relationship with someone that I saw every week at the same time in the same place for many, many months. So seeing that in action made me think, I want to do this. I think that this has been immensely healing for me, immensely reassuring, enlightening, and I want to be an active agent in a similar process with someone else, which is a very common story. When you start training and you start sharing stories of why you do what you do, we all come to that. We've had, more often than not, people have had a really life-changing experience in therapy, and they want to spread the word somehow.
Absolutely. So obviously some of it comes to you naturally because you were a good listener from the early days of your life, but then you had to work on it also, because today, I mean, if you are working with other people and providing them, with their support for their mental health, obviously there's work that has involved in it as well. It's part being something that comes to you instinctively, but obviously you've worked around it as well.
For sure, and that's what training is there for. It's obviously, I think some of the skills and some of the tools that a therapist uses are human, right? Empathy, with a few exceptions, we're all born with it. The capacity to offer that unconditional positive regard to someone is also something that is in us. It happens by default, but you can hone that. And a lot of the times, I think it has to do with your capacity, how able you are to connect with something in you that might be close to what that other person is feeling, to what your client might be feeling at one particular time. So doing work on yourself through your own therapy, well, that's key to any training in the UK. So whilst you're training to become a therapist, you need to be in your own private personal therapy as well. And I see the value of that, because it's just about that. It's making sure that you're connected with yourself, that you're mindful of what's going on with you moment by moment, but also then, applying that to creating that relationship with the other. And a lot of it happens through experience and being exposed to an exposure to many different clients, many different ranges of issues, and many different realities.
Absolutely, and giving only comes when your cup is full, obviously. Then you can start giving to other people as well. So obviously, in terms of experience, knowledge, and in terms of working on yourself, that is obviously the core, the underlying factor. Only then will you be able to help others.
Oh, most definitely. I think the crux is working on, you are using yourself as an instrument, if you like.
Correct.
You're bringing yourself into the work, and that's, Robin Sharma's serving, right? Bringing yourself into something, whatever it is that you do.
So why is there a need for a university mental health day? And what does this recognition, entail?
It's about visibility. And I think it's about speaking about something that in this society, in this culture, is still pretty much a taboo. And I'm talking about the UK, but the same, I would say, is true to where I'm originally from, in Spain, and across the world. Mental health is still, obviously we've come up with that term, which is a way to acknowledge and make visible an aspect of ourselves and our health that is not that tangible, right? And we're making a lot of progresses in terms of neuroscience, and what neuroscience is doing to document what actually happens in us. But we have to create labels, we have to name things and put them out there for people to start to engage with it. So University Mental Health Day for me is about creating dialogues, putting together different activities within your community, your university community, to make sure that people talk about and ask questions and engage in dialogues and bring up their own preconceptions or their own whatever stigmas they associate with the word, so that someone hopefully can engage with that, and through dialogue bring them into, well, this is something that is not scary, it's something that we all have, and it's a continuum, right? It's a spectrum, and we might be in different places in that spectrum throughout our lives. But if we don't talk about it, there's very little we can do to improve it and to make sure that everyone in our communities is looking after themselves.
I completely agree with you. I mean, it starts by talking about it, obviously. This is very important, and you rightly said there's still a lot of stigma, not only in this country, but countries all over the world, for that matter. But what I would like to know is, when we talk about stigma, do you feel there is probably less or more stigma when we're looking at university students compared to, adults, in the workplace or anywhere else?
Well, I think it's probably, you see parallels between both, but what you see, say, in the university setting at the moment is two parallel sort of discourses or two parallel things happening. So on the one hand, you've got the stigma that is still present, and if you talk about universities that are international, you're going to have people coming from different cultures with their own preconceptions, with their own stigma associated with it, or simply that's not in the language, right? Mental health is a very sort of European, North American construct in itself, right? It's something that academia has been trying to put out there and package for the masses to understand a bit better. But it doesn't translate into certain cultures. So I've got students that talk about the soul, the spirit. They don't talk about mental health or emotions, and they have a very different language to talk about that. So you have the stigma, and alongside that, running parallel, you've got students that have no stigma associated to that, but sometimes they might even overuse or they might self-diagnose even. So there's a lot of talking about mental health and a lot of information available online, and I see some students really, they're very quick at when it comes to holding on to one label, and that defines them. So they might make life choices based on that label. So instead of maybe feeling anxious about going to a lecture, which is we all might have experienced that in our lives. The first day we go to uni, we will feel anxiety. We will feel those nerves of, I'm going to be in a room full of randoms, what's going to happen? What I hear a lot is, I'm not going to go to that first lecture because because of my social anxiety. Which, in some instances it might be diagnosed, but in some others, once you start talking to that student and unpicking it, it's something that they just grabbed off the internet and they assumed that's it. That's who I am. So to sum that up, I think there's two tendencies. Not talking about it because it's not in my culture, I feel a bit uncomfortable with it, or I hold on to, that dominates me and that defines who I am, and I become my own expert. I do not seek help. I do not talk to other humans about it. I'm just going to grab whatever I get from the internet, self-diagnose and adapt my life and make changes, sometimes drastic changes to my life, because I think that's what my diagnosis requires. So that's those are the things that I more commonly sense in universities. I think outside of the university setting, say I work in the offices, it will vary depending on the sector. In my office, we work with students, so we're trying to walk the walk. So we've signed up for Time to Change. We have a massive board with our pledge at both receptions on both campuses saying we've signed up to Time to Change, which means we talk about mental health. And mental health is something that affects us all, and we want to have conversations about it. And we follow that up by organizing different events. So we've got Time to Change events for staff, but we also have got campaigns geared to students so that they can start talking about it. We've got Mental Health Awareness Day coming up. So we try to bring it into the mix and we talk about it. What happens in other sectors, at work in other sectors outside of education, I think is a very, you might have as many realities as businesses there are. So, I can only work on assumptions because I haven't got data. I'm very well versed in uni and higher education data, but not so much in the workplace. But that comes with the ethos of the organization, with the hierarchical structures, with the power structures, and you can go from places where there's complete openness. My partner works for an education charity, and it's widely spoken about, and it's open, and there's peer support groups, and they want to sign the Time to Change pledge. But then I hear from alumni who know what I do and who work in banks, for instance, or in the financial sector, and that those conversations are not really happening. So you've got a varied picture.
Yeah, there's a broad range, obviously. Now, it also depends, which sector you're in or which environment, basically. Typically, in general, which environment you're in.
That's right.
And when it comes to students, most likely there could be two extremes. One is where, either they're self-diagnosing themselves or they're just shunning themselves out and not talking to any other human being and just closing themselves off.
That's right.
Hence why the importance of the dialogue being opened up in universities.
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah, exactly. We, like I mentioned, we try to increase our visibility, and University Mental Health Day is a great opportunity for that, because there's a platform for it. It's widely advertised. It's very much in all media. But we try to do things throughout the year. We also have got savvier at identifying periods that might be particularly tricky throughout the year, and we've been targeting those. So we've been 1 month after the orientation, so once students are 1 month into class and into the pattern, the new routine, we tend to have one mental wellbeing workshop facilitated by my colleague and I on mental well-being, self-care, supporting others. There's a lot of data out there about students resorting to other students when they feel a bit stressed or under the weather. So what we do is acknowledge that they will have to play a role as helpers sometimes, but also that it's key to keep healthy boundaries, to be aware of what they can offer, and also to be aware of the resources available to them. So they don't have to hold all the answers. That's why my colleague and I are there. But we also partner with different organizations that can offer them help on aspects ranging from addiction to sexual health and specialist mental health services as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, because obviously, especially when you spoke about international students as well, and they feel probably more overwhelmed than local students because now they've left their families.
Yeah.
And they've just come to a new environment altogether. But it's interesting, and it's good that you have identified the particular times where they would be more vulnerable than just any other time.
Yeah.
And just creating that ecosystem for them that they can receive that help, and they're also aware that there is help out there. The whole point is just to speak up.
Yes. We put a lot of emphasis on connecting as well. Connecting not only with us, mental health services, but also with one another. So sort of joining any of the social activities that the school organizes, but also the different student clubs and societies. We bring up to them, when we do these workshops earlier in the year, we tell them about the research behind loneliness and isolation and the cost of that on mental health. And I quote Professor Laurie Santos from Yale University. She's been spearheading, bringing into the curriculum some training into mental health and raising awareness in mental health. And she came up with this stat about the impact of loneliness, comparing the impact of loneliness on your mental health to smoking on your physical health. So basically, extended periods of loneliness will have the same impact on your body as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And they all
That's
look,
huge.
yeah, they all look like you. They all look quite stunned by the cost of that, and I can see it. Other authors talk about it. Bessel van der Kolk talks about how it's so common and so prevalent in most issues, in most mental health problems, and the onset of those. Isolation, social isolation, tends to be somewhere, background or foreground, but it tends to be present in people that develop mental health difficulties. So bringing that into focus, not in a scary way, it's not about scaremongering, it's just, we've got data, and the data is there to help and to inform maybe how you might look after yourselves. So connect with others, be mindful maybe of your range. Some people are more introverted than others, so you need to find that window of comfort for you, but being savvy of that, then you can bring in opportunities to connect with other people in a significant manner. So we're not talking about the weather. It's how are you and what's up, what's going on. I haven't seen you in a few days. What's going on? Just engaging at a deeper level. I set them homework to make sure that at least they have one of those significant conversations with someone they're close to daily, at least once a day. And I truly believe in the power of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's mostly like instilling like a habit.
Yeah.
So you do that with somebody who you're close to, then tomorrow you try and extend that to somebody else, and the third person, the fourth person, and that just becomes very habitual.
Yeah.
And just to check in different people, if they're all right, and then pick on vibes maybe you feel, if something's wrong, maybe offer to help.
Yeah, being a bit more aware and attuned. And at times I think that comes from, in the first place, of being attuned within yourself and knowing you, and finding a place of peace within yourself that allows you to maybe look out as well. At times I think it's hard for them. I think that they live in an environment that is so pressured. Another colleague, fellow psychotherapist and researcher Sally Brown recently talked about the perfection trap in Millennials, and how the higher levels of perfectionism, we're seeing levels of perfectionism we hadn't seen before, and there's a lot to say about that. It's perhaps the fact that now we're more exposed than ever to images of living the perfect life, right? And social media, with all its good, it's got a lot to account for in that respect. It's that constant comparison with your environment, with your fellow, your peers, but also your friends, your family. It's just, and also even celebrities, right? You've got access to everyone now and what everyone is doing at any given time. So falling slightly short is hard. And this generation is taking the hit. They're really finding that difficult. And Sally Brown also argues that the way in which psychotherapy can help them is through maybe trying to bring down a bit that perfectionistic self within them, by instilling in them a bit of self-compassion, a bit of maybe you didn't get those grades, but it's been fun. You are learning, you're developing, you're struggling, but that's part of your life experience, right? Look at the bigger picture, instead of being focused on getting the perfect grades and the perfect score at the end of the year. It's harder said than done, though.
I mean, the underlying factor is it's okay not to be perfect.
Yeah.
So yes, right. Of course. I mean, you correctly said social media. Obviously, now you're comparing your life to the perfect life that you see in social media, from influencers to celebrities to maybe even your peers and your friends, because everybody's posting only good things and the perfect things on social media. But I think students also perhaps maybe go through another pressure where, especially in higher education, I would like to touch on that a little bit. So in higher education, now you're going to leave the university and you need to find a job, and then there's placements and there's interviews and all that. So being perfect in your grades and being perfect candidate for the interview, because there's so much competition out there as well. So you think maybe that also adds on?
Oh, for sure. It's a highly competitive marketplace. Getting that high score, high results is something that employers look to a degree. I think, one of the things about Mental Health Awareness Day is bringing in different elements of the community. So it's not just the student wellbeing teams engaging with it. In where I work, we engage closely with the careers team, because they have a lot to say about what employers are actually looking for. And employers might be looking for the poorly called soft skills, making sure that you're a well-rounded individual that can be around others and be emotionally attuned and, you know, achieve. Yeah, but possibly, you know, if you lower the level or lower that bar of how much you need to achieve and bring in a bit of that softness and that care and that being human, the marketplace is saying that is also being sought after right now. So it's not so much about what you've achieved and the scores that you've got, but how much you've developed and you've grown, and how much opportunity you've given yourself to do that, to learn about who you are and how you tick. And that's why I think counselling and psychotherapy are seen as perhaps as a something to grapple with a crisis. It's a tool available for students to grapple with a crisis. And what we try to say is, you don't need to get to crisis point. You know, this is available to you, and it's something, it's just a space. It's almost like this sacred space where you can look inside and look at yourself without the fear of, I'm competing with my therapist. You're not competing with me. I'm a human, and we're having that human-to-human conversation here. I'm not better than you. I'm human as well. You know your stuff better than I will ever do. So let's talk. And I feel that's, you know, it's what we're trying to instill in them. But yeah, going back to your initial question, I definitely think that employer expectations are very high at times. For certain industries, they might be required to have a certain GPA, a certain score. But then I think it's also about opening up that dialogue of, is that what you want? So is it worth it? Quoting Laurie Santos again, she quoted a recent study by Yale University that basically concluded that students that satisfaction or heightened levels of well-being don't come with higher grades. In fact, the higher the grades you get, the lower your levels of well-being. And that has to do with the fact that generally, once you've achieved that, you need to sustain it. Achieving that generally takes a lot of hard work and might include you removing yourself from your social network, or limiting the amount of times that you go out, you exercise, you do this, you do that, you enrich your life in other ways. So it's not that great. And yeah, you might get a 6-figure salary when you finish your degree, but how well are you going to be? What's your well-being going to be like? So if you want to go for that, fine, but make that choice, be informed before you make that choice, and maybe reflect on what really matters to you. Apart from employers, I think families in the students I work with are key. Family expectations are at times huge. If you come from a high-flying family, the bar is already up there. So at times you have to do anything it takes to get there. And very little is left at the end of that journey if you don't look after yourself.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's not just employers, it's families as well. Families have a lot of expectation, especially international students, a lot of families are spending a lot of money to put their children, in excellent universities like yourself. But it's also good to know, for everybody listening today, so you spoke about, corporates, so it's IQ versus EQ. So emotional intelligence is also sought after these days. It's not just your academic grades. And it's also very interesting when you said that the higher your grades and the higher you are, your well-being is impacted that much more. So it is the choice ultimately you make, but it's also to be aware of these are the circumstances you're trying to put yourself into.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And there's definitely a choice. At times, I think, I work with students that come to the therapy room, and it's only once they get there, they sit and start talking, that they realize, oh, hang on, I actually have got a choice. So it's not all scripted. And that also can be quite liberating. And I think it's another thing that I promote about therapy. It's just connecting with yourself and what you want to then make those choices.
So in your experience, when you obviously you speak to a lot of students, so what is the most common problem or issue do they come up? Is it mostly academic, or is it their families, or is it job, or
you've got anything under the sun. I would say what I tend to find matches a lot. The Student Minds conducted a piece of research a few years back. I think they call it the Grand Challenges survey, and they came up with 3 things that most students came to therapy with. One of them was fear of being judged if they underperform. Another one was needing to do well, needing to meet that high standard at all times. And then, fear of being ridiculed as well, if they expose their vulnerability. So those are things that come up a lot. But then you have anything from life events. Obviously, university days are formative years in many ways. So in terms of neuroscience, we know that the frontal lobe is still forming. So you're still figuring yourself out. And a lot of them come to realizations even before they come into therapy. They might have this sort of eureka moment of, oh, I hadn't realized that I identify with this. I'm talking about anything to do with, maybe sexual orientation, gender identity, you name it. So there's a number of things that being in this new environment, away from families, a bit more distant from that script, that expectation, that gives them that space, that headspace to start asking themselves bigger questions, perhaps. Who I am, who am I, what do I want? As simple as that, what do I want? So that's the stuff of therapy.
So a lot of confusion in general.
Yeah.
Confusion not only academically or their career, but confusion also about their personality, sexual orientation, and what they like, what they don't like, and what is wrong and what is right in general.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, things.
And that obviously adds on to your stress and anxiety, and then probably leads on to depression and so many other things.
Especially when you feel that you shouldn't be sharing that information, or that whatever it is that they're carrying is too big to share. And a lot of them do. And when they start talking about it, you can see how even their body language softens, because it's like you've been holding something in for years and years and years, and here you are just uttering it. And just the fact of putting it out there, like putting anything in writing, can be so freeing for them. So are counseling centers in universities accessible to students in terms of accessibility? Are they easily available? Is there like a wait list? Typical scenario. I think it varies. Generally, they are available. So most universities advertise the services available in their intranet. So any student would be given an orientation session, and you would know what services they are, and then it would be in your student portal, right? What tends to happen is that those services tend to be oversubscribed. So wait lists are very common. That's what I hear from different groups that I'm a member of, like Amoshi and the University Mental Health Advisory Network as well. Most units have got a waiting list, which creates its own issues, because obviously The idea is that you can internally support the students. If you send the student to the public service, the NHS, waiting lists tend to be even longer. So it's an ongoing issue. There's definitely demand. There's growing demand, and I think it's down to all that we've mentioned, the current generation, perhaps because of these high levels of perfectionism, comparing themselves, having that really high bar to raise up to, but also comparing themselves constantly with all that stimuli, everything that they get daily. They need it more. But also it's more, we talk about it more. It's much more open, so slowly but surely that stigma in the UK is dissolving. We've got royalty talking about it, championing charities that are about mental health. So I think the common opinion is that it's beginning to be acceptable. So people access services and people want to access services. We have more students coming into higher education now with the increased opportunities, increasing access of more population into higher education. That's meant that services are overstretched. And that's the reality of most of my colleagues. I have to say that where I work at Hult, we haven't got a wait list at the moment. So students get seen generally on the go. So at the moment, it's 2 of us and we have capacity. But we're seeing how we're getting busier and busier. And the more we talk about it, the more we make it visible, the more demand we get.
I mean, it's amazing that, Hult doesn't have a wait list. I mean, in general, a lot of universities do, but it's amazing. Obviously, you guys are doing an excellent job on that. Mm-hmm. But it's a two-sided sword in that essence. Yes, we want to talk about it, but then the subscription is also going up, and then how do you cope up with the demand?
Yes.
Because the subscription, you want the subscription to go up, mm-hmm. because you want everybody to speak about it and and to be aware that your health is not only your physical body, but also your mental body.
Yeah, that's right.
So the holistic approach to health, that is important. But then how do we keep up with the demand, and how do we keep supporting, not just the students, but in general? Because like you rightly said, so the wait time in universities, if there's a longer wait time, you probably refer them to the NHS or the system, but then the wait time just increases even further. So obviously there is a problem.
There's definitely, if not a problem, at least a big challenge.
Yes.
For us, for all of us in this sector, and all of us who know the benefits and who want to make them more accessible to everyone.
So what suggestions would you share with those universities that are trying to create this internal program, but are facing issues to develop such programs within their universities?
I think there's a lot of support available within the higher education community to get some best practice examples. There's some really good examples out there. I recently met with a colleague who's the head of the Wellbeing services at Brunel University, and they've basically revamped the service in the last year or so. So the idea is to create a wider net, so that you're able to hold within the university, offer that initial response to that demand. So we acknowledge, and I acknowledge, that maybe counselling and psychotherapy is not what everyone needs at all times, right? But if not that, you might still benefit from a chat with an advisor. It could be someone that has got knowledge of mental health, that has been properly trained. So most universities now have got mental health advisory services where you can go to and get information, you can get referral on to other services, or you can simply get that warmth and containment and that chat that can be enough for you to then think, okay, well, I know that I can do other things in the meantime. So there are good models operating out there already. I think our model at Hult works for us because we're a relatively small university. So we've got around 1,600 students in London, but we're a global business school. So what we have in place now seems to be working. So we have not only the one-to-one appointments, but we also organize, like I mentioned, apart from the workshops that we run throughout the year, we organize de-stress and mental health awareness weeks, coinciding with those more difficult periods. So generally January is not a great month, it's the coming back from the holiday, from the break, facing the shorter days, the lack of sunlight. There are a lot of environmental factors that don't help, so we try to bring in the focus onto mental health and well-being in general. So we do fun activities for them. They have massages on site, they've got smoothie bikes, they've got classical music concerts, they've got pet therapy. We try to bring in that holistic approach to looking after yourself. So there are communities for any university that might want to set something up to pull from and talk. And I think we like talking as a community. So yeah, I would say if in doubt, reach out. Amoshi is a good network. Umhan is another good network. But then Universities UK has got different working groups that are setting up centres, and obviously the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, the BACP, they have got their university working group too.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those names. I'm sure it'll help a lot of people who are probably trying to, or maybe struggling with setting up programs within their own campuses or their spaces. When it comes to the faculty, because obviously, you're surrounded with so many students, and a lot of them are undergoing a lot of pressures to do with their mental health, but that also leads on or adds on to a lot of pressure to the faculty. Is there any support or any program for the faculty as such in the universities?
So we work very collaboratively with them. So in fact, the workshop that we offer early in the year on mental health and mental well-being, we were invited by a professor. So we generally, a faculty has got faculty forums throughout the year, and my team attends them. So we have, we normally do a presentation about these are things that students are coming to us with, and we open the conversation with them. So we give them our stats on basically how many appointments we've had, what might be common themes. Obviously we keep confidentiality very close to our hearts, so we're mindful of that, but we try to paint a picture of this is what we see in our end. What do you see? What are your concerns? We also created a guide, and I know we borrowed from an example created by the University of Exeter, where they came up with a guide for faculty and staff on how to support students that might be struggling with their mental well-being. So it's basically a series of flowcharts, but also some information on these are the support services, these are the people that you can contact if you need to, and these are your boundaries. These flowcharts sort of prompt them to maybe think about, can I help here, or is this actually for someone to deal with, and who are those people? So creating, and this is in line with both the University Mental Health Charter, that has been a new development by the charity Student Minds. They've created this best practice example for all universities when it comes to mental well-being and mental health. And that was spearheaded as well by Step Forward, which was the government initiative for unis to implement best practices with regards to mental health. So what that policy said, and what the Mental Health Charter for unis is saying, is that mental health is a responsibility of the whole community. So faculty are key, communication between faculty and relevant staff is key, and we need to create that and build that dialogue, and create clear lines of signposting. So if a faculty member is dealing with is seeing early signs, and we tend to list those signs for them, signs that might be concerning about a student's mental well-being. What do I do with that as a faculty member? Where do I go? Who do I inform? So having internal cohesion, internal communication, but also making mental health visible by organizing events that put a focus on it, by like student university mental health day, but all the other events that we do. And I think most universities that I am in contact with organize similar events throughout the year. So it's just a chance for you to talk about mental health, physical health, the connection between both, and get students talking about it and thinking about it.
So a holistic approach to health, and obviously getting everybody on the same page.
That's right.
So it's not just the counselors and the well-being team, but obviously everybody involved.
Yeah. So there's trainings. Another thing that has become very sort of common practice now is train all student-facing staff on mental health first aid. That's all about recognizing, being aware, listening, keeping your eyes, your ears open as a staff member, and then identify maybe signs that might be concerning, or within what might be normality for a student, right? Because that might vary from one individual to another. So being mindful of differences, but then identifying things that might be concerning, and then referring them on. Engaging in that dialogue. Hey, I've noticed this. Have you thought of talking to the mental well-being team? Or have you signed up with a GP? Are you registered with a GP? Do you speak with them? So give everyone that works with students tools to feel competent when talking about mental health and mental well-being. So it's not just the responsibility of two of us, but the whole campus community.
I'm sure you must have tried a lot of things when you're, developing programs and checking what's working, what's not working. We've obviously discussed a lot of things which is obviously working, but I'd like to understand a few things. Perhaps maybe it'll be good for us, and everybody else listening as well, to understand what hasn't worked. So maybe we can then be mindful of that in our daily lives when we're dealing with others or with ourselves.
I think one clear thing that comes to mind is assuming that one thing works for everyone all the time when it comes to mental well-being and mental health. So assuming that everyone might be responsive to, or might be able and willing to engage with therapy and counselling at any given time, that's not realistic. I think you have to be in a place where you're willing to open up and be vulnerable and do the work, put yourself out there, or it's not going to work. So I could sit here with you and talk it up and tell you what my experience has been and how life-changing it was for me. If you're not committed to it, and by that I mean if you're either not willing to grapple with things about yourself, willing to change something that makes you feel stuck, willing to forgive yourself and be compassionate with yourself. If none of that is happening, you're not going to engage with it. So I feel that we've gone to another extreme at the moment. And I'm lucky enough to have two deans of undergraduate and postgraduate that are one has got a psychology background. The other one was the champion for us to embrace time to change and sign the pledge. So he's been championing from the top down. And he tends to send everyone to therapy and everyone to counselling. So when he talks to students, he just says it, and we might bump into him on the corridor. He might be talking to a student and he might say, "You two need to talk." And as much as I think it's great and meaningful that he sees the benefit of it and there's buy-in on his side. I think there has to be buy-in from the student. So moreover, talking and having conversations and putting information out there and making it accessible. I think a podcast is a great platform. It's something that this generation is very keen on and very open to. So creating different platforms to disseminate information so that people can then make informed choices is the way to go, because one size doesn't fit all.
Absolutely, that is. I mean, you're on point when you say, and us as human beings, we try to generalize a lot of things, and we try to, treat others. There's saying treat others how you would like to be treated, but then it is not always the same context,
right.
Especially when you talk about mental health. I mean, what fits me doesn't fit somebody else. For a lot of university students, especially a lot of international students, university is their home. This is all they know for at least a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
So how do you create a safe space for students within the universities?
I think we're trying to obviously amp up the student networks. So we try to, at Hult, when they come in, especially undergraduate students, they have buddies. So we've created a peer support network, which is also very common in other unis. And the idea is that they have a senior student, if you like, putting them under the wing, showing them the ropes. I think everybody has got 15 students that can come to them with questions, anything to do with settling in, or maybe they are unsure about who's who on campus. So these senior students are the main port of call initially. And obviously they find it easier, they're closer to them in age. The buddies get trained on several different things. One thing we train them on is we do the look after your mate training devised by Student Minds. So this is about awareness of mental well-being, mental health, healthy boundaries, self-care, the things that I mentioned to you that we share with the whole student population, right? But they are trained to support students and be able to signpost them in whatever they need. So the buddy system is one of the things that has been working really well. Student clubs and societies are also another network for students. So they can be professional, social, sports related. And what you have is students, generally again senior students, they campaign. They've got an idea, so it could be an entrepreneurship club or a TEDx club. They have a package club already, and early in the year they sell it. They plug it to the wider student community, especially the new students, right? They target those. So those are great in creating community. Then we have a very healthy student services teams, one on each campus, and they put together different events throughout the year. They're generally social, but some of them have got a cultural focus. So they recruit students from a particular nationality or culture if they want to celebrate a specific festivity. So we have Diwali festivals, we have Thanksgiving festivals, we have different Eid. We celebrated it one year. So we have different festivities that bring the whole student community together. And ultimately what we're trying to do as well is to make sure that they talk about things that are a bit uncomfortable. So more recently, we've launched in collaboration with Student Services. My colleague, there's two of us in the team, and my colleague championed this new campaign called It Stops With Me, which it sort of borrows from what her and I have heard students talk about in our sessions. So a lot of them have shared not feeling safe in our community. They feel that there's a lot of microaggressions going on, that students might make flippant comments that, they're blissfully unaware at times. So there's no malice behind those comments in theory, but they might make comments about a nationality, a religion, a sexual orientation, a mental health problem. So what my colleague decided to do is she enlisted a group of champions out of all those students that made comments of, I've been subject to some kind of comment that I didn't like, it didn't agree with me, and they came up with this Stop With Me campaign. So they created a visual campaign, they created their own logo, their own leaflet, and they did a photo exhibition across the communal area on campus with students holding onto a board with whatever it was that they heard and how that made them feel. And the response was amazing. The students that took part, the ambassadors, were very apprehensive about how it would be received, what kind of conversations would that start. But what we got back is that students engaged with it. Students appreciated the fact that we were making it or enabling these ambassadors to make the issues visible, because there are things that the community are experiencing, and the message was, there's no tolerance to that. There's no room in our community for that. And we want to create conversations. So if you're saying ABC, these things, because you're blissfully unaware of the impact they have on certain individuals, you need to know. And we want you to engage with it. And we want to create a conversation and change the language and change attitudes. So changing language and maybe grappling with that first can have such a massive impact on how you perceive something, on your attitude towards something. So yeah, loads of things going on. A very long answer to your question.
No, but a very good answer, because I mean, obviously the campaign sounds extremely powerful. I mean, I was just trying to picture that in my head, and it's just, I mean, I'm sure you had a positive response from it, because it is just so powerful to visually see something like that. You know, just a while ago, I was on social media and I saw a post where you had like a collage of faces, and everybody was like, every face was a smiling face, every face was laughing and smiling and having the best time of their life. But the caption, which I thought was extremely powerful, read, "This is how depression looks like." So I mean, it is something similar to the campaign that you spoke about, because absolutely. I mean, to have a visual representation of the comments, for instance, I'm sure it was extremely powerful with both sides of the students who faced that, and students who were probably bullying other students, or calling them names, or it's just a self-realization.
Completely. It's about making visible both ends, right? And hopefully getting them to converse about it in a safe space, because there cannot be dialogue if there's no safety, if there's no psychological safety, if you don't know that whether being vulnerable will be safe. And especially, when you carry a wound, if you know that, that's opening up to that, it's almost like reopening that wound, right? Opening up to engage in that dialogue could potentially reopen that wound, or it could help heal it. But for that, in order for that to happen, you need to have the right setup. And if we don't create that trust, and if we don't make it visible and get people talking and thinking about it, we're not going to get there. And that's easier to achieve in a counselling setting, where you have that one-on-one contact, where you spend as a therapist time creating that trust and building that working alliance, right, with your client. But you get to a place of safety where hopefully, if therapy works, where your client might be able to, look at the wound, sometimes, feeling it, touching it, feeling the pain of it, but over time that will heal. So we're trying to launch that and maybe extend that principle to the wider community, which is a long shot. And we're just beginning to see if that works. But it's exciting.
Well, hopefully slowly but surely.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've spoken a lot about, the importance of speaking up trying to break the stigma. But what else can we do to spread awareness? I mean, is there something more that we can do, or probably we should be doing?
Creating, I think we're doing it, and I think we should probably continue to do what people like you are doing. Like I mentioned earlier, creating platforms, opening up new platforms for people to gain access to support, for people to have conversations, like-minded people, but also people that come from different ends, right? And diversity, I think, is key for sure in any conversation. You need to have different standpoints, hopefully not too polarized, to be able to engage and change through that. But I think we're doing. I mean, thanks to people like you, we're doing a lot of work in the right direction. I think it's just visibility, communication, and creating safety, creating safe spaces where people can talk more and connect more. Back to that research about loneliness and the positive impact of social connectivity. Continuing to create community within our communities. I think that's what I would say. That's the way forward.
There's one more thing I'd like to touch upon before we conclude this interview. I also get an opportunity to speak to a lot of students, and we spoke about the pressure in general, but perhaps maybe obviously talking about your own personal experiences, you've been a student yourself, and now you're in the quote unquote real world. So you've experienced more or less whatever students are experiencing today. But I mean, I try and tell them, maybe you'll echo that, or maybe you can elaborate on that, but I try and tell them not to be too hard on themselves.
Yeah.
Because I mean, things don't have to be, we spoke about being perfect, and we spoke about, don't try and be so competitive. So, I mean, for me, the underlining thing is, don't be too hard on yourself. Life is a journey. It's not a sprint. I mean, take your time, fail. Fail exactly. Fail and then learn from your mistakes. And it's not the end of the world. And probably, you're trying to get this job today, but maybe it's not the right thing for you, and you will explore, right? So, I mean, any advice you would like to give students, any student who's listening today? Just maybe like a life advice, so that they can help manage their own mental health in a better way, or maybe not just their mental health, but their peers and everybody around them.
Well, the main thing I would say is that you are not alone. Whatever you're going through, whatever you're doing, whatever you're concerned about, you're not alone in that. Help is at hand. Your university is, if they're attuned to what's going on in the world, they will have put services in place to support you and to make sure that you get where you want to get to. And like you said, I think compassion, Gilbert puts it really well in his compassionate mind model, cultivating that soothing space. I see most of our students concerned about achieving, and being driven by adrenaline. You've got this threat system operating to get you where you want to get to, or where your script says you have to get to. But we spend very little time looking at the things that ground us, that make us feel calm, nurture us, and also bring us to who we are and what we actually really want to do. So bringing into your life things that bring you there, and you might already be doing it. The students generally, when they come to me, I always check with them, what is it that you do that already gives you that sense of calm, groundedness, nurturing? And they all have something. It could be music, it could be religion, it could be exercise, it could be anything creative. There's so many things that they come up with. So keep doing what you're doing that is doing you good, but also be open to other things that might do you good. And talk to your support services, talk to your mental well-being teams, because they're there to help. and they're passionate. They're probably as passionate as you and I are about mental health and mental well-being.
Well, that is great advice, Antonio. To be honest, I honestly feel that we are extremely lucky to be in a country like the UK, and there are great universities like Hult and amazing people like yourself who is so compassionate and who is unconditionally, you just want to help, and you obviously understand. And from there on, creating from safe spaces to the different groups and to the different activities around the support system basically for the students. So I think we're all very lucky, and I'm sure your students are very lucky to have you in the university, and hopefully that can replicate in all different universities as well. So thank you so much for today, Antonio. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
And you, thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you so much. And that's a wrap.
Great.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
That was